During the early days of regulating common carriers of freight, some certificate of operating authority would be passed from one person to another as the industry went through developmental changes. A good example of this can be found by following the history of one state, one certificate, and one man. The state was Iowa. The certificate was number 16, issued by the Iowa Railroad Commission. The man was Henry Billman. At the onset of regulating the new trucking industry, it was the Railroad Commission that had the jurisdiction over determining who got the certificates of convenience and necessity, as they were called. Let's follow the history of certificate numbers 16 and 161 during a very early period of 7 years from 1923 to 1930. Let's talk about certificate 16 first. On July 12, 1923, Henry Billman filed an application to haul freight between the two Iowa cities of Mason City and Charles City. The distance between the 2 points is 32 miles. In the early 1920s, the population of Charles City was over 7,000 residents and was the home to a large tractor manufacturing company called Hart Parr. Larger Mason City had 20,000 residents. The next year, on February 18, 1924, Henry Billman was granted certificate number 16 to haul freight between the two cities. Originally called Certificate of Authorization, another year later it was replaced by a Certificate of Convenience and Necessity. In 1927, Billman applied for additional routes. More on that in a minute. Let's continue first and follow the trail of Certificate number 16. In 1928, Henry Billman and Henry C. Dieterman formed a partnership called Billman and Dieterman. Certificate 16 was transferred to the new partnership on September 29th of 1928. Less than 6 months later, it was transferred to another partnership that Billman was not a part of. This time, the certificate was transferred to Dieterman and Helmendinger of Mason City. A year later, on April 25, 1930, that partnership ended, and Certificate 16 was assigned to only George L. Helmendinger. Now let's go back to Billman's other application. On February 10, 1927, he filed an application to operate between Mason City, Hanlintown, Fertile, Joyce, Bristol, Lake Mills, Scarville, Vingie, and the northern state line of Iowa. He also sought permission to operate between Charles City and Nashua. This time, the process of getting the certificate approved wasn't as easy as the first one. A month later, during the hearing before the board, there was strong opposition against both routes. After hearing the facts, the Iowa Railroad Commission Board stated that the proposed route between Mason City and the state line would promote the public convenience and necessity and would issue a certificate for that route. The application for the other route would be denied. That was not the end of it. On April 13th, the application for the granted route was amended to eliminate service to Vingie, the part nearest the state line. A week later, Billman inaugurated service between Mason City and Scarville. For an unknown reason, on June 8, 1927, the carrier was permitted to suspend service over the part of the route between Scarville and the state line for a period of 90 days. After the 90 days, service was not restored on that part of the route, so the Commission amended the Certificate of Authority and removed that portion. Henry Billman's involvement with that route would end on February 14, 1928. Certificate number 161 was transferred to Beck Jordan and Company of Mason City. That was a partnership between Gilmer D. Beck Jordan and Gilmer Vision.